The fluorescent lights of the diner hummed a weary electric tune, the only constant on Maya's third double shift of the week. It was a sound she usually found comforting, a sign of routine and predictability. Tonight, it felt like a current of anxiety running just beneath her skin. The source of it sat in the corner booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl that nobody ever wanted. They'd been there for an hour. The man, all sharp angles in a tailored suit that didn't belong in a place that smelled of stale coffee and fried onions, did all the talking. His voice was a low, smooth murmur, too quiet to carry across the room, but his posture screamed. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, pinning the woman opposite him with his gaze. The woman was a ghost. She wore a simple gray dress that seemed to absorb the light around her, making her fade into the booth shadows. Her name, he'd said, was Lena. He'd ordered for her a black coffee she hadn't touched, a slice of apple pie that sat perfectly untouched, a monument to a meal that was never going to be eaten. Her hands rested in her lap, but Maya had seen them earlier, twisting a paper napkin into a shredded pulp. She'd watched Lena lift her water glass, and the tremor in her fingers was so violent it sent tiny, concentric rings across the surface. She'd set it down immediately, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. Maya wiped down the counter, her cloth moving in slow, deliberate circles. She was an expert at being invisible, a skill honed over years of serving people who looked right through her. But being invisible meant you could see everything. She saw the way the man, Marcus he'd called himself, smiled, but it never reached his eyes. His eyes were cold, flat chips of slate. They scanned the diner not with curiosity, but with the tactical assessment of a predator mapping out an enclosure. He never looked at Maya, not once. When she refilled his coffee, his hand remained on the table, his fingers a millimeter from the cup. But he didn't acknowledge her presence. It was a dismissal so complete, it was more insulting than any curse. Lena, however, had glanced up for a fleeting second. Her eyes, wide and haunted, met Maya's. It wasn't a plea. It was something emptier. It was the look of someone who had already accepted their fate. The look lasted only a moment before Marcus said her name, a soft razor blade of a sound, and her gaze snapped back to him as if pulled by a string. In the back of the diner, at the long table by the kitchen doors, sat the usual night crew, Bear and his boys, the Iron Guardians Motorcycle Club. They were loud, their laughter a rough, rumbling counterpoint to the diner's hum. They were mountains of leather and denim, with beards that held the stories of long roads and hard fights. They were Maya's favorite regulars. They always tipped well, called her by name, and never let any of the late-night drunks give her a hard time. Bear, their leader, was the quietest of the bunch. He sat at the head of the table, a massive, immovable presence, nursing a single beer for hours. He watched everything from beneath heavy lids, his expression unreadable. He seemed to exist in a state of permanent, patient observation. The contrast was stark. The loud, intimidating bikers exuded a strange kind of safety, a contained power. The silent, polished man in the corner booth radiated a palpable danger, a power that was actively, menacingly being used. Lena pushed her chair back, her movements stiff. "I need to use the restroom," she said. Her voice was a fragile whisper, the first words Maya had heard her speak. Marcus didn't look up from his phone, which he'd been scrolling through with cold precision. He just nodded, a curt, dismissive gesture. Lena walked toward the back, her path taking her past the bikers' table. None of them paid her any mind, lost in their own world of shared jokes and stories. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor, her shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow. A few minutes later, Maya grabbed the key for the supply closet, which was right next to the restrooms. The paper towel dispenser was low. As she fumbled with the lock, she heard it, a sound. It was a sob, so sharp and full of despair, it felt like a physical blow. It was instantly choked off, smothered as if by a hand clamped over a mouth. Silence followed, thick and absolute. Then a new sound, a frantic, desperate whisper into a phone. "He found me," the voice breathed, ragged with terror. It was Lena. "He found me, Mom. I don't know what to do. The car. He's taking me to the car. He said we're driving tonight." No, I can't. You don't understand what he'll do." There was a pause, a muffled sound from the other end of the line. "There's no one," Lena whispered, her voice cracking. "It's just a diner. I have to go." The call ended with a soft click. Maya heard the faucet turn on, a frantic splashing of water. Maya stood frozen, the metal key cold against her palm. Every instinct screamed at her, the trembling hand, the untouched pie, the man's cold, possessive stare. It all clicked into place, forming a picture so ugly it made her stomach clench. This wasn't a bad date. This was a capture. Her mind raced. Call the police. What would she say? A woman was crying in the bathroom. A man is being creepy. They'd take 30 minutes to arrive, and by then, the corner booth would be empty. Marcus and Lena would be a vanishing pair of taillights on the highway, swallowed by the night. Her boss's rule was clear. Mind your own business. Don't get involved. Getting involved was how you got hurt or fired. She pushed the thought away. The memory of that choked sob was too raw. The whispered words, "You don't understand what he'll do," echoed in her ears. Lena emerged from the restroom. Her face was pale and scrubbed, but her eyes were puffy and red-rimmed. She looked like a prisoner being led back to her cell. As she passed Maya, their eyes met again. This time, it was different. The emptiness was gone, replaced by a stark, silent terror. Maya's decision was made. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady hum of the diner. She put the key back on its hook, her hands shaking so badly it took 2 tries. She looked over at the corner booth. Marcus was watching Lena approach, his expression unreadable, but his jaw was a tight knot of muscle. He glanced at his watch, a sharp, impatient tap of his finger on the crystal face. Time was running out. She could walk away, go back to wiping counters, pretend she heard nothing. In 5 minutes, they would be gone, and her life would go on, untouched. But the thought of Lena's terrified face, of her disappearing into the night with that man, felt like a stone in her gut. She wouldn't be able to sleep. She wouldn't be able to forget that whisper. Her gaze drifted to the back table, to Bear. He was a biker, a man who lived by a code she couldn't possibly understand. He was intimidating, dangerous in his own right. But she'd also seen him gently lift a stray cat out of the parking lot, and she'd heard him tell one of his younger guys to call his mother. There was something else there, beneath the leather and the scowl, a deep, steady sense of justice. It was a crazy risk. He could tell her to get lost. He could laugh in her face. But the police were a gamble, and time was a luxury she didn't have. Bear was right here. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, Maya picked up the coffee pot. The liquid sloshed, hot and dark. It gave her a reason, a prop. Her feet felt like lead as she crossed the floor, each step a conscious effort. The laughter at the biker's table died down as she approached. They all looked up, their expressions ranging from curious to guarded. She focused on Bear. "More coffee?" she asked, her voice coming out steadier than she expected. He just grunted, pushing his mug forward. She poured, her hand miraculously steady. As she leaned in, she lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, so low that only he could hear it over the diner's ambient noise. "Bear," she murmured, not looking at him, her eyes fixed on the stream of black coffee filling his cup. "The couple in the corner booth. The man in the suit." He didn't move, but she felt his attention sharpen, become a laser. "The woman, Lena. She's in trouble. Bad trouble." Maya's words came out in a rush now, a torrent of fear and certainty. "I was in the hall. I heard her crying in the bathroom. She was on the phone. She said, 'He found me.' She said he's taking her somewhere tonight." She sounded terrified. She pulled the pot back, the coffee almost overflowing the mug. She still didn't look at him, pretending to be focused on her task. "He hasn't let her out of his sight. He ordered for her. Look at her hands." Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Bear's gaze shift, just for a second, toward the corner booth. A slow, methodical scan. He took in the untouched pie, the tense line of Lena's shoulders, the proprietary way Marcus's arm was draped over the back of the seat, not touching her, but claiming the space around her. He looked back at his mug. He said nothing. For a heart-stopping moment, Maya thought he was going to ignore her, that she'd made a terrible mistake. Then he gave a single, slow, deliberate nod. It was barely a movement, but in the silent language of his world, it was a contract. It was an answer. Relief washed over Maya so intensely her knees felt weak. She straightened up and moved away from the table, her job done. The bikers resumed their conversation, their voices a little lower now, a little tighter. Nothing seemed different, but Maya knew everything had changed. The air in the diner was now charged, vibrating with unspoken intent. From her station behind the counter, she watched the silent ballet unfold. It was masterful in its subtlety. Bear didn't bark orders. He didn't need to. He caught the eye of a biker named Jax, a wiry man with tattoos crawling up his neck. Bear tilted his head, a fractional movement, toward the front door. Jax nodded, stood up, and stretched his arms over his head with a loud groan, as if working out a cramp. He then ambled toward the entrance, leaning against the glass door to look out at the street, effectively becoming a human barricade. Another biker, a giant of a man they called Tiny, got up and walked to the jukebox. He fed it $1, his massive frame blocking the main aisle, as he slowly, methodically, punched in a series of songs. Johnny Cash began to fill the diner, a gravelly voice singing of prisons and trains. It was a net, woven with casual movements. No one would notice a thing unless they were looking for it, and Maya was looking. She polished the same water glass over and over, her knuckles white, her gaze locked on the corner booth. The moment came. Marcus tapped his phone one last time, then slid it into his pocket. He dropped a few bills on the table, not even bothering to look at the check. "Let's go, Lena," he said. The command was soft, but it carried the weight of an iron fist. He stood and pulled her to her feet, his hand gripping her upper arm. His fingers dug into her flesh, a gesture of ownership. Lena stumbled slightly, her face a pale mask of dread. They started for the door, and then Bear moved. He didn't rush. He simply rose from his chair, a mountain of a man unfolding himself from the table. He moved to the center of the aisle, standing directly in their path. He wasn't aggressive. He was just there, an immovable object. Marcus stopped short. An annoyed flicker crossed his face. "Excuse me," he said, his voice clipped with impatience. Bear didn't look at him. His eyes were on the cash Marcus had left. He gestured toward it with his chin. "Forgot your change," he rumbled. His voice was calm, a low, tectonic vibration. "Keep it," Marcus snapped, trying to sidestep him. Bear shifted his weight, a small movement that nonetheless blocked the path back completely. The other bikers had gone silent. The only sound was Johnny Cash singing about walking the line. "It's diner policy," Bear said, his tone still mild. "We always give change." The lie was so blatant, so absurd it hung in the air like smoke. This wasn't about money. Everyone in the room knew it. The tension ratcheted tighter, a wire humming with strain. Marcus's composure finally cracked. The smooth veneer dissolved, revealing the cold fury beneath. "Get out of my way," he hissed, his hand tightening on Lena's arm. She flinched, a small pain sound escaping her lips. That was the trigger. Bear's eyes, which had been on Marcus's face, dropped to the hand on Lena's arm. The shift in his gaze was more menacing than any threat. He then looked past Marcus, his eyes finding Lena's. The hardness in his expression softened, just for a moment, into something almost gentle. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping the confrontational edge. "Everything okay? You look like you could use another cup of coffee. It's on the house." He was giving her a choice, an out. The entire diner seemed to be holding its breath. Maya stood frozen, the glass still in her hand. Lena's eyes welled with tears. For a second, she just stared at Bear, a flicker of disbelief and hope warring in her expression. Then she gave the tiniest shake of her head, a small, almost imperceptible no. It was all the confirmation Bear needed. His gaze snapped back to Marcus, and the gentleness was gone, replaced by granite. His voice was flat, an undeniable statement of fact. "The lady's staying." The air crackled. Marcus stared at Bear, his face contorting in a mask of rage and disbelief. He looked past him at Jax by the door, at Tiny by the jukebox, at the other bikers who were now slowly rising from their seats, a silent wall of leather and muscle. He was surrounded, outmaneuvered, and utterly alone. The predator had walked into a bigger predator's cage. For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. The only motion was the slow sweep of the clock's second hand. Marcus's mind was clearly working, calculating his odds. He was smart enough to know there were none. With a final, venomous glare, he did the only thing he could. He let go of Lena's arm. The release was so sudden she staggered back a step. "You'll regret this," Marcus snarled at Bear, the threat empty and pathetic. He then turned his venom on Lena. "You stupid bitch! You have no idea what you've just done." He turned and stalked toward the door. Jax didn't move until the last second, stepping aside with a lazy grace that was an insult in itself. The door swung shut behind Marcus, the little bell above it giving a cheerful, incongruous jingle. He was gone. The tension in the diner didn't just break, it shattered. Lena let out a shuddering sob and her legs gave way. She would have collapsed onto the linoleum floor if one of the other bikers hadn't caught her, gently guiding her into the nearest empty booth. Maya finally moved, her limbs feeling disconnected from her body. She rushed over, not with a coffee pot, but with a glass of water. She set it down on the table, her own hand trembling in time with Lena's. "It's okay," Maya whispered, putting a hand on Lena's shoulder. "You're safe now." Lena looked up, her face a mess of tears and relief. She grabbed Maya's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you," she choked out. "Oh God, thank you." Bear sat down heavily in the seat opposite Lena. He didn't say anything. Yuri, he just sat there, his massive presence a silent promise of protection. The rest of his club formed a loose perimeter, a silent, watchful honor guard. They had turned this cheap, greasy spoon into the safest place on earth. The jukebox clicked off, plunging the diner into a sudden, profound quiet, broken only by Lena's ragged breathing and the ever-present hum of the lights. In that moment, watching this terrified woman slowly realize she was free, Maya understood something. Sometimes the smallest voice, the one that whispers in the dark, is the only one that matters. And sometimes, all you have to do is make sure the right person hears it. Have you ever had that feeling? That gut instinct telling you something is deeply wrong, even when everyone else seems oblivious? It's a powerful thing, that intuition. It's a voice worth listening to. Let me know in the comments if you've ever trusted that feeling and what happened. The hours that followed were a blur of quiet efficiency. One of the bikers, a man named Preacher with kind eyes, made a few quiet phone calls. He spoke in a low, coded language, but Maya caught phrases like safe house and sister network. It was clear this wasn't the first time the Iron Guardians had done something like this. They were a well-oiled machine, built for more than just riding highways. They learned Lena's story in fragmented pieces. Marcus was her ex-husband. The restraining order she had against him was just a piece of paper he'd laughed at. He'd been hunting her for months after she'd finally escaped his violent, controlling grasp. He'd found her working a cash register job 2 states over, and this dinner was meant to be the end of her freedom. He had her bag, her phone, her entire life packed in his car. He'd told her they were going somewhere no one would ever find her. Lena had no doubt what that meant. By the time the sun began to hint at the horizon, a nondescript sedan pulled into the diner's empty parking lot. A calm, middle-aged woman got out and came inside. She spoke to Lena with a quiet authority and a deep well of compassion. Within minutes, Lena, wrapped in a jacket one of the bikers had given her, was escorted out to the car. Before she left, she turned and locked eyes with Maya across the room. She didn't say anything else. She just raised a hand, a gesture of profound, life-altering gratitude. Then she was gone, on her way to a new life, a real one this time. Bear walked Maya to her car as the shift ended. The sun was painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and soft orange. "You did a good thing tonight, kid," he said, his voice a low rumble in the morning quiet. "I didn't do anything," Maya said, shaking her head. "You guys did." He stopped and looked down at her. "We're a hammer, a big, loud, stupid hammer. But a hammer's no good if someone doesn't point it at the right nail." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick wad of cash. "This is for you." Maya stared at the money. "I can't take that." "It's not for you," he corrected gently. "It's for your tuition. You're smart. Too smart to be slinging hash for the rest of your life. Finish school." He pressed the money into her hand and closed her fingers around it. "And from now on, you're under our protection. You ever need anything, you call us. You understand?" Maya could only nod, her throat thick with emotion. That night changed everything. It was a hinge point in her life. She used the money to pay for her final year of college. She graduated with honors. The Iron Guardians became her unlikely, fiercely loyal family. They were at her graduation, a rumbling phalanx of leather and chrome that terrified the other parents and made Maya beam with pride. She never became a lawyer or a businesswoman. Inspired by Lena and the quiet network that had spirited her away, Maya became a social worker. She dedicated her life to helping women escape situations just like the one she'd witnessed. She had a unique advantage. She knew who to call when official channels failed. More than once, a quiet conversation with Bear resulted in a predator finding his car mysteriously disabled, or his new apartment suddenly surrounded by a dozen very large, very intimidating, concerned citizens who just wanted to make sure he remembered to respect a woman's boundaries. They never broke the law, but they bent it into the shape of justice. Years passed. Maya got married, had a child. Bear, the man who had terrified so many, became the world's most unlikely doting grandfather, teaching her son how to ride a bicycle with the same patient focus he applied to everything else. Every year on the anniversary of that night, a postcard would arrive at the diner. It was always addressed to the waitress and the guardians. They came from all over the country, then all over the world. A beach in California, a mountain town in Colorado, a bustling market in Florence. The pictures showed a woman with a radiant smile, often with a husband and 2 children by her side. The messages were always simple. I'm safe. I'm happy. Thank you. Lena had built a beautiful life from the ashes of her old one. The diner itself became a quiet legend. The story was never told loudly, but new waitresses were always told. If you see something, say something. And if you need help, talk to the men at the back table. The corner booth with the cracked vinyl became an unspoken symbol of sanctuary. One cool autumn evening, a decade after that fateful night, Maya found herself back at the diner. She was meeting Bear for their weekly dinner. As she slid into the booth opposite him, she saw the familiar postcard taped up behind the counter, the one from Florence. She smiled. Bear followed her gaze. Got that one this morning, he said. She looks good. She looks free, Maya corrected softly. He grunted in agreement, a small smile touching his lips. He raised his coffee mug. To quiet watchers, he toasted, his eyes meeting hers. Maya raised her own mug. And to loud hammers, she replied. They clinked their cups together, the simple sound a testament to the extraordinary bond forged in a moment of fear and courage. It's funny how life works. The people we think are heroes, the ones with the badges and the fancy titles, aren't always the ones who save us. Sometimes it's the person you least expect. The overlooked waitress, the intimidating biker, the ordinary bystander who chooses just for a moment not to be ordinary at all. They choose to see, to listen, and to act. If this story reminds you that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and that courage can be as quiet as a whisper, do me a favor. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories that prove one small act can change the world. You never know whose life you might change just by paying attention.